Homage to fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all lineage benevolent masters. The Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in a million eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, generate supreme bodhicitta. New practitioners, please turn off your phones and don't use them during the teaching. Now we'll continue. The words of my perfect teacher, currently covering generosity. Within generosity, yesterday we covered material giving. In material giving, we discussed ordinary giving, extensive giving, and extremely extensive giving. These were explained in 3 aspects. Today we begin with Dharma giving. Dharma giving refers to bestowing empowerments, transmitting teachings, reading lineage transmissions, and so forth. Finding ways to plant virtuous Dharma in others' mind streams. Whether giving empowerments, transmitting teachings, or reading lineage transmissions, any method to help those who previously didn't believe in Buddhism to develop faith. But merely having faith isn't enough. We must truly plant seeds of virtue in their mind streams. Ideally, help them understand the profound meaning of Dharma. This point is extremely crucial. We've mentioned this repeatedly on different occasions. Simply taking refuge, generating bodhicitta, or going to temples to burn incense and prostrate to Buddhas. While these are Buddhist rituals and virtuous Buddhist practices, most fundamentally, we must understand the meaning of Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings. Once we understand the meaning of the teachings, we will know how to distinguish virtue from vice. Then we will practice earnestly. The ultimate result is helping sentient beings truly escape suffering and find happiness. Therefore, whenever conditions are favorable, spreading, promoting, and proclaiming the Dharma is extremely important. If you can do this, whether teaching or listening to the Dharma, the merit is tremendous. If you can do this, the merit is immense. Of course, if we apply very strict standards, the qualifications for Dharma listeners and teachers are rather, there should be some description below. The standards are quite high. But generally speaking, the world needs some spiritual teachers. As I've mentioned, spiritual teachers are best when they are monastics. If there really aren't any monastics available, then lay people without self-interest. Complete absence of self-interest is impossible for us ordinary beings. But ultimately, transmitting such teachings isn't for oneself. If one truly understands the meaning of Dharma, at least 80% or more, then teaching others with good intentions, not only is there no fault, but there's great merit. Buddha also said in the Mahasanga Vinaya, even if hundreds of thousands of Jambudvipa worlds were filled with pure gold as offering, it cannot compare to one Dharma gift that inspires practice. This means that countless amounts of pure gold filling the entire southern continent or Jambudvipa, given as offerings to all sentient beings, pure gold filling the entire world offered to sentient beings. Of course the merit would be tremendous, but there's one type of merit that surpasses it. If we teach others even a single verse, helping them understand Dharma and practice accordingly, this merit far exceeds the former. The Sutra of the Great Heap of Jewels also teaches this. The merit of filling the world with 7 treasures and offering them to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas cannot compare to the merit of reciting a single verse. Therefore, our long-term practice is extremely important. Long-term help in making others understand Dharma is truly quite important. So when you have the opportunity and all conditions are favorable, daily study of at least one verse in such a class. If you have the chance to truly listen before qualified masters and teachers, that would be best. If you really don't have this opportunity, due to advanced technology today, as long as you make an effort, there should be methods available. There are many qualified spiritual teachers. Through various means, some distribute CDs and tapes or other kinds of audio and video that can all be received. So in our current degenerate age, many beings in cities are busy every day with what? busy with their own livelihood. Every day is extremely exhausting from what? Just for their own trivial matters of this life. Very few truly make efforts for future lives and the great matter of life and death. Therefore, we must contemplate Dharma meanings long term. This isn't just lip service. This point is very important. So when I teach, I mainly use content from past great masters and Buddhist scriptures. If every day I used modern, domestic, and international news, or things people especially like to hear, current conceptual thoughts and life situations, people might gladly accept it. If using relatively traditional approaches, quoting scriptural citations and stories, teaching the direct meaning of texts, some people might find it harder to accept. But regardless, as practitioners, most of us are Buddhists. For Buddhists to truly understand Buddhist teachings, even understanding one verse's meaning per day, or the meaning of one passage or one level of meaning. In this way, gradually, slowly, merit can be said to accumulate like an ocean. Many wrong views and incorrect thoughts in one's mind stream can gradually, slowly be refuted. Therefore, we should also try our best not to become overly worldly, including when our Dharma teachers give essential instructions to everyone. They also can't be too worldly. If too worldly, although people today especially like to hear current conceptual sounds, but such sounds only generate curiosity in you momentarily. To truly cut the toxic roots of afflictions and habitual tendencies in one's mind stream, I'm afraid there will be some difficulties. Therefore, when we teach everyone, even if we can find relatively good, easily understood content for one day, one passage, one teaching, or one verse of scriptural citation, providing these to everyone has considerable blessing power, we'd best be able to memorize them. If we really can't memorize, reading several times consecutively creates conditions in your mind stream for the Vajra seeds of Vajra speech to ripen. Therefore, when we listen to teachings, everyone should listen with a sense of preciousness and yearning. When we discuss Dharma giving, we also mention practicing accordingly. This point is very important. Practicing accordingly. Truly genuine practitioners at a certain point, indeed, regardless of what kind of life adversities they encounter, should be able to use them skillfully and transform them into the path. The day before yesterday, Khenpo Tsuchim Lodro, Tuku Tenjin, and several of us went to Yashinga to visit Akyu Rinpoche, who recently manifested illness. We went to pray for his long life. We didn't stay there for very long. From the surface, he indeed manifested quite serious illness. But during our prayers, Rinpoche never mentioned his physical suffering or illness. From beginning to end, everything was either about great perfection awareness states or how we together could propagate the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. I had this feeling, if this were an ordinary worldly person, they might constantly mention this hurts, that hurts, their own matters, including diet, their body's sensations, and so forth. From this, one can sense the fruits of a lifetime of practice. At the final moments, or when manifesting serious illness, will be revealed. Of course, he promised to try his best to remain in this world. There should be no major problems, nothing too serious, but it's hard to say, because sentient beings' merit and the manifestations of Buddha's and Bodhisattvas' aspirations, when and what phenomena will ripen, no one can say for certain. But wherever we are, whether propagating tantric teachings or exoteric Buddhism in the world, truly great masters, we've also studied much before, including in the 7-branch offering, various prayer methods for Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to remain long in the world. When everyone normally recollects, it's like this too. Of course, we don't necessarily need many people running around. This isn't necessary either. Actually, some great masters indeed have mastery over life and death. When going to Pure Lands, they can also go of their own accord. Some can go anywhere, as long as it benefits sentient beings. Previously, when a Sangha was approaching his apparent passing, Some disciples asked which Pure Land he would go to. At that time, Asanga said, "If it can benefit sentient beings, I'm willing to go even to hell. If it cannot benefit sentient beings regarding Pure Lands, I don't necessarily have any thought of going." At that time, he should have been in his 70s and said this. Of course, any great master leaving one world while remaining in another world uses different forms to benefit limitless sentient beings. So regardless of where they go, for the master's own aspiration power, the difference may not be very great. But for us worldly people, for example, when a great master in one place manifests serious illness or departs to other realms, for many sentient beings, this is a sorrow. When Guru Rinpoche left this world previously, indeed, for many of us disciples, it was the most unforgettable and saddest harsh winter month of our lifetime. Especially for me, Guru Rinpoche's image often appears before my eyes. The scene of his final departure from the academy. At that time, Khenpo Gyalme Rinjin and I specifically went to the lay practitioners area because when the monastics lined up, we generally couldn't see the Guru. We too specifically walked down there when Guru Rinpoche departed by car. At that time, it can be said that for me, it was the last time in this lifetime to see the Guru's face. So this matter, whether in my dreams or when awake, often becomes an object of contemplation, especially for me. The first sight of Guru's face and the last sight when leaving this world are always unforgettable in this lifetime, more than any worldly person, including one's own relatives, though there are many impressions in a lifetime. But in my impressions, indeed the Guru's Dharma kindness, the Guru's every kindness, cannot be compared with any other worldly favor. Of course, from a true practitioner's perspective, as I just mentioned, inspiring practice, truly integrating one's mind stream with practice. Actually, for each of us, superficial appearances aren't very important. What's most fundamental, in a short human life, each person should have some gains from practice. Practice isn't that easy. If we memorize a treatise, we might work hard and memorize a treatise within a few months. Or if we recite mantras, reciting earnestly every day, reciting millions isn't very difficult. Or if we do other things, writing a book by consulting many materials, writing or translating several books isn't very difficult. But what's most difficult? That I must practice well and truly eliminate afflictions from my mind stream. If not eliminated, reducing greed, anger, and ignorance is extremely difficult. What's the result of practice? It should manifest as reducing greed, anger, and ignorance. This point, for those of us who encounter sublime Dharma in this lifetime, for each person, it's an inescapable great matter. But those who can truly accomplish it aren't very many. So for the Dharma friends present, this human life, I often remind everyone not to frighten anyone. Indeed, human life is only several decades, for us worldly people, generally speaking. 360 days a year. If a person can guarantee living to 100, that seems like 36,000 some days. Calculating this way, we cannot possibly live that long. So when we estimate our human life, it's not very long. In such a human life, every day we can, when we truly encounter Buddhism, what level can we finally practice to? This point, we must also observe ourselves. Of course, among all virtuous practices, I always feel that listening to and transmitting Dharma, maintaining connection with Dharma every day, in worldly terms, don't completely separate from Dharma. Once separated, you become you, and Dharma becomes Dharma. Eventually, you walk your own bright path. In the end, you might still enter a narrow bridge. There's this danger. So, what's most crucial for us now is making our mind enter Dharma every day. This point is especially important. The only method is everyone studying together. Of course, it's also explained here that truly teaching and expounding Dharma, strictly speaking, probably requires first ground or above, or a certain level to be qualified. There are two reasons. One is truly in the ornament of clear realization, the characteristics of turning the Dharma wheel are explained. Best is when Buddha turns the true Dharma wheel. If one hasn't attained Buddha's state, then a first-ground bodhisattva can also truly eliminate afflictions from beings' mind streams, and the Dharma wheel of their own mind stream can revolve in others' mind streams. Otherwise, when ordinary beings transmit Dharma to ordinary beings, it plants virtuous roots and achieves some similar elimination. Complete elimination has certain difficulties. So from this perspective, Dharma transmitters must attain first-ground bodhisattva or above. This is one purpose. And one reason explained below is this. Also, because previously in Tibetan areas, many people used Buddhism as an excuse actually pursuing their own worldly affairs, which is also very unreasonable. So to stop this evil behavior, here the requirements for Dharma transmitters are strictly and specifically raised. Of course, before we fundamentally eliminate selfish thoughts and distractions, superficially accomplishing altruistic deeds is also just appearance and cannot truly benefit sentient beings. To truly teach and expound Dharma, one must eliminate mental distractions. Disciples once asked Atisha, when can one accept disciples? When can one engage in altruistic activities? When can one liberate the deceased? 3 questions were asked. When I go to some schools, some people ask 3 questions consecutively. Sometimes I forget, sometimes I can basically remember. Atisha answered these 3 questions one by one, saying, when one has realized emptiness and possesses miraculous powers, one can accept disciples. Accepting disciples, having realized emptiness and also having miraculous powers. As explained in Finding Rest in Meditation and other sutras, for example, if birds' wings aren't fully developed, they cannot fly freely in the sky. Similarly, if bodhisattvas don't possess miraculous powers, benefiting others is very difficult. So some of us also often say, after I go down, I plan to build a monastery and accept many disciples. When can I accept disciples? Atisha already said, one is realizing emptiness. One is attaining miraculous foot power or attaining divine sight, knowing others' minds. At this time, one can accept disciples. If so, for us ordinary beings, this lifetime is probably impossible. So of course, this requirement is very high. Second, when selfish thoughts are completely eliminated, one can benefit sentient beings. This is still very important. We haven't completely eliminated this, but not for ourselves. If I want to benefit sentient beings, first observe. See if what I do today, what I say, is it for myself or with good intentions to benefit others? If with good intentions to benefit others, we dare not say we've permanently eliminated selfish thoughts. But regarding the before and after of this matter, there's nothing for ourselves. Under such circumstances, benefiting sentient beings should be possible. Only after attaining the path of seeing can one liberate the deceased. Liberating the deceased isn't easy. Only after attaining first-ground bodhisattva is it possible. Of course, some of our Dharma friends chant Buddha's name. At this time, we may not necessarily be able to completely liberate them, but it still has tremendous benefit for escaping samsara and obtaining human birth. During the liberation process, a while ago someone mentioned a place where the hospital had already examined and the patient seemed to have died. After death, when they performed liberation for him, suddenly the corpse sat up. After sitting up, it spit out blood and then fell back down. That's when it truly stopped breathing. Afterward, that group of lay practitioners never dared to chant liberation again. Originally, they were a chanting assistance group. From then on, they never went again. I think he probably wasn't truly standing up. Perhaps the breath inside moved slightly. At the time, they were all a bit frightened, thinking it was a walking corpse. But that shouldn't happen. Actually, if one truly has some realization, going to charnel grounds was always done this way. Many Indian practitioners usually felt that their selfish thoughts had been eliminated. Such people would go to either extremely terrifying places or extremely dangerous places. Suddenly, it becomes obvious, and the so-called self would appear. So previously, some Vijataras would specifically observe whether their selfishness was eliminated, going to charnel grounds where there are some corpses, especially in summer when some corpses are quite decomposed and severely bloated. At such times, sleeping together with the corpses. When sleeping at night, they would observe whether they truly had selfish thoughts. If they slept particularly well with no feeling at all, it indicates a relatively high state of selflessness. If at midnight they saw corpses and touched them, at that time, if truly frightened or unable to sleep, this indicates their selfish thoughts haven't been eliminated. I hear there are also such methods. So among you, if some feel that, often people say, now I have no selfish thoughts at all. I'm entirely for benefiting beings, as if I've already realized selflessness. At that time, one can truly examine this. When thinking, one's practice might be slightly better, but when truly encountering danger, at this time, the so-called self naturally appears. Yesterday on our journey, there was an extremely high mountain. When I looked, below was a 10,000-foot abyss. But because it kept raining, the car was sliding around. When I looked from my side, it seemed we had really tumbled down. My heart was extremely frightened throughout. After reaching the bottom of the mountain, I understood. Oh, how shameful. Indeed, usually I seem not to be very attached to self, but at this time, the so-called self and fear became particularly obvious. So during our usual practice, we can't be arrogant or speak big words. When truly encountering something frightening, for many people, the realization level may not be very high. So here it says liberating the deceased. True liberation, being able to liberate, this is speaking from this boundary. It doesn't mean our chanting groups must all attain first ground bodhisattva. If one hasn't attained first ground bodhisattva, they're not qualified. It's not this meaning. Why is this so? Because the meaning of sutras and treatises must be examined. This is why I often tell everyone to study Buddhism well. Without studying Buddhism, taking things out of context, understanding just the literal meaning of one or two sentences, then below, starting to do many unreasonable things. Scriptures and treatises, great masters' teachings, all have different ways of interpretation. This interpretation requires skillful wisdom. So here, it should be understood this way. One can't say, wow, only after attaining first ground bodhisattva can one liberate. This is what Atisha said. You shouldn't chant, we don't have this qualification. If so, all Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, don't all people understand even this point? It's not like this. So true teachings require very deep wisdom to understand their intention. Actually, Atisha had a guru called Avadadakpa. Avadadakpa was a rather special guru. Sometimes when Atisha requested teachings, he wouldn't give them. Sometimes without requests, he would actively teach others. Once, a very crucial incident, Atisha and Guru Avadadakpa, the two of them together, crossed a particularly narrow wooden bridge. When crossing the bridge, Avadadakpa was in front, Atisha behind. When they reached the middle of the bridge, Avadadakpa turned around. He said, "Student, do you know what's most crucial? Until one realizes the emptiness of selflessness, one must be very careful and cautious in accepting and rejecting cause and effect." So Atisha later engraved these words in his heart throughout his life. Later, in many of Atisha's teachings, he said, before realizing selflessness, one must be careful in accepting and rejecting cause and effect. Now some of us, upon hearing a little about emptiness or tantric teachings, pay no attention whatsoever to accepting and rejecting cause and effect. I once saw someone write many great perfection books, writing his own name on them. Later, I learned from different sides that this person doesn't believe in karma at all. He writes great perfection works, writing 1 or 2 books, but later, when many people asked, he fundamentally doesn't believe in karma. Now in the world, there are particularly frightening such things. perhaps he has already transcended selflessness. Having transcended selflessness, then returning, already having self again. The master also once said, "Now in this evil age of 5 turbidities, it's not a time for pretense and showing off, but a time for encouraging diligence. In this current degenerate age, it's not time to pretend and show off, engaging in various formalities before others. It shouldn't be like this. Now most crucial is often encouraging oneself, often urging and inspiring oneself, making one's practice increase, being diligent day and night. This is very important. It's not a time for seeking high positions, but for placing oneself in humble positions. In this current degenerate age, it's not time to seek arrogance and self-importance, thinking oneself as achieving this or that, seeking high positions in fame, status, and all aspects. It's not this time. One should place oneself in humble positions, wearing ordinary clothes, living frugally in daily life, practicing diligently. It should be such a time. It's not a time for accepting disciples, but for relying on solitary places, especially if one's mind stream has no Dharma meaning whatsoever. You can't go to cities to accept this disciple, accept that disciple. At first when you go to accept them, but later you might already have. Previously, a guru abroad said tearfully, some individuals seek geshe degrees, and after obtaining geshe diplomas, they go to cities to begin accepting disciples through Buddhism. Not long after accepting disciples, after a few days, they also merge into society, returning to lay life and so forth. Very sad incidents often occur, so some of our practitioners should first perfect the qualities in their own mind streams. Relying on quiet places, relying on spiritual teachers, this is the time. It's not a time for training disciples, but for taming one's own mind. Before one's mind stream is tamed at all, training disciples is very difficult. One should first often tame the afflictions of one's own mind stream. It's not a time for following words and phrases, but for contemplating meaning. Now, it's not about being attached to phrases every day. Speaking pleasant words is not about that. But truly, as I just mentioned, now our practice is very important. If there's no practice at all, no matter how well you speak or how properly you act formally, actually, your mind stream goes against Dharma. And at death, nothing remains. So contemplate, for example, the preciousness of human life and impermanence. When practicing preliminaries, repeatedly contemplate each principle. After contemplating these principles in your mind stream, can truly generate some certainty and realization. It's not a time for wandering everywhere, but for staying in one place. You can't go there today and to another place tomorrow. Whether to India or Lhasa, running around every day, some individuals have become accustomed to running around, and after getting used to it, they can't stay still. Going to this monastery, that monastery, interviewing this master, that master, receiving an empowerment here, asking some questions there, going everywhere, but finally, when you truly must leave this world, or face the great matter of life and death, whether you have any confidence, searching your heart, you know yourself. So many great masters of the past, throughout their lives, relied on one or two masters, and practiced well continuously. If one's mind stream lacks confidence and pure perception, relying on however many masters may not necessarily be beneficial. So wandering everywhere is meaningless, especially people in cities who spend all day doing meaningless things. Now in cities, truly sometimes there are too many negative circumstances, too many external conditions that bewitch people's minds. Those who can truly maintain their inner mind and practice diligently are extremely rare. So here, very sublime teachings are explained. Also, the 3 brothers explained before once asked Geshe Dromtonpa, between practicing in solitude and benefiting beings with Dharma, which of these two is more important? Geshe Dromtonpa said this: for beginners who have no signs or realizations in their mind streams, benefiting beings with Dharma won't have any benefit. Having not even a drop of merit, just taking refuge initially, then immediately wanting to accept other beings, in this way there's no benefit. Their blessing is like pouring from an empty vessel. No blessing can be obtained from it. Their pith instructions are like wine dregs that haven't been pressed, producing thin wine without any taste of pure brewing. No true meaning because they themselves. Some people are like this. They've never practiced themselves. They may not even have correct views of karma, may not even have worldly correct views, but verbally they teach others. Some people specialize in this, but this is useless because there are no qualities in their mind streams. They've never contemplated Dharma meanings. No matter how beautifully you speak to others, it's meaningless. For example, if a teacher wants to guide students, at least he should have the basic qualifications of a teacher, wisdom and virtue. Similarly, whether our Dharma teachers or some instructors, to teach and expound Dharma to others, to truly lead them, at least they should have some, if they really lack innate qualities. For example, if you are leading classes for others, you must prepare well in advance. Otherwise, so many people's time would be wasted. Such a pity. Everyone's life is limited, and everyone isn't without things to do. Everyone feels they have many important matters. So sometimes, except when my health is particularly poor, aside from very few exceptional things, I don't dare waste everyone's time. During class time, except for very few special or necessary matters, generally I don't mix in many personal matters or other conceptual thoughts. Plus, preparing in advance as much as possible, at least reading the content to be taught once or twice. Otherwise, if you haven't even read or looked at it, just reading mechanically from the text, casually, like some teachers nowadays spend all their time, for example, going to bars at night to play, sleeping in late the next morning. When formally teaching, they haven't even combed their hair, taking textbooks to the lecture podium and talking nonsense. The other day, I saw some worldly teachers. Truly, they all looked quite sad. Looking at these people's behavior, we're still relatively responsible. Though our wisdom is limited, we still feel everyone's time is very precious, at least for everyone. We haven't casually dealt with things perfunctorily or just muddled through. Our wisdom and the realization are limited, but regardless, the world isn't like this now. Class is supposed to be at 9 o'clock, but they might come at 9:30, some with eye crust still not wiped off, and there they still, alas, I won't say more. Even those who have obtained warm signs but whose confident conduct isn't yet stable, also cannot engage in benefiting beings. Their blessing is like pouring from a full bottle, making others full to overflowing while they themselves become completely empty. Their pith instructions are like passing a torch to others, enabling others to be bright and clear while they themselves become pitch black. This is the middle type. The previous one, neither meaningful for others nor for themselves. This type is like water from this bottle being poured into that bottle, or like passing this torch to others. Others can be illuminated, but they themselves have nothing at all. Some practitioners have a little bit of realization, but, for example, after transmitting tantric pith instructions, they themselves have nothing left. But this type, as also said in the Flower Ornament Sutra, always wishing to benefit beings, not seeking personal happiness. Although their own realization is lacking, they still transmit their understanding to others without selfish mind. This type is also relatively reasonable. Also, Buddhist sutras say, like a blind person holding a lamp, illuminating others while unable to see themselves. For example, a blind person holding a lamp. Because they are blind, they can't see at all. But others, because the blind person holds the lamp, others can see. I often think this way. My own practice is also very poor. But sometimes when teaching others, because Buddhist content is so wonderful, if others gain even a little benefit, my sacrifice doesn't matter. Others also say what I say is reasonable. When others say, your practice is very poor, you teach very badly, how this and that, when scolding me, I'm very happy. Why? Indeed, others have already recognized my true nature. If others say, "You are a great accomplished master, you are a practitioner," at such times I feel uncomfortable. Why? Oh, others haven't recognized my true nature, because I know my own practice myself. If others praise me, this isn't my true nature. I still understand this. So some people transmit to others with good intentions, but this type is beneficial for others, though they themselves indeed are. Their own practice is also affected, and their own time is completely gone. This type of person is considered middle level. They themselves have nothing, but others still receive partial benefit. Because if they have absolutely nothing, their teaching may not be completely good either. There's also this type of person, and another type. Only ground-attaining bodhisattvas can truly accomplish the work of benefiting beings. Their blessing is like the accomplishment of a wish-fulfilling vase, both ripening others and not leaving themselves empty, always remaining full. Their pith instructions are like a butter lamp, both lighting other lamps and not causing any obscuration to themselves. This is the best. Of course, for first-ground bodhisattvas and above, they ripen others while they themselves are already ripened. Like a butter lamp, it can illuminate thousands and millions, and all lamps can dispel darkness. The main lamp itself also becomes even brighter. For such true practitioners to transmit and teach Buddhism to others is extremely beneficial. Currently dwelling in this age of five turbidities as ordinary beings, we should practice great compassionate bodhicitta in solitude. Compassion and bodhicitta. It's not the time to directly benefit beings. Didn't Atisha just say this? But rather, the time to eliminate afflictions from our own mind streams. For example, it's not the time to cut down precious medicinal tree seedlings. For particularly precious medicinal trees, you can't cut them down. Gradually, slowly nurturing them is the time to protect them. Therefore, many of our bodhisattvas with dedicated service, you can't, right at the beginning when you have just a little bit of realization, immediately transmit teachings and empowerments to others. In this way, it affects the increase of qualities in your own mind stream. Directly engaging in Dharma giving has some difficulties. Without true realization oneself, teaching and expounding Dharma to others won't have much effect on others either. If one relies on transmitting Buddhism to collect offerings and material gains, then it becomes as Padampa Sangye of India said, making the Dharma into merchandise for gaining wealth. Padampa Sangye said this: we shouldn't use the Dharma as a means for making money or as merchandise. Why do many people now transmit Dharma to others? The reason is they gain some benefits themselves. Why do they often expound Buddhism to others? Just like a worldly teacher giving classes, actually he wants to get paid. If one treats Dharma as merchandise, whoever does it is unreasonable. We must pay attention to this, whether lay people or monastics. No one should ever make Dharma a source of material gain. Previously, when Guru Rinpoche, not long after I came to the academy, His Holiness said, at that time, seeming to go to Shinlong, Rinpoche said, I generated an evil thought. This time, when going to Shinlong to transmit Dharma, I might receive some offerings. Having generated such a thought, so from now on, when transmitting Dharma, I won't accept even a single kata. Throughout Rinpoche's life, every time the Guru gave empowerments and taught, he always emphasized in class not to make any offerings. Because I generated a thought then, the Guru often said this. I generated a thought that others might make offerings to me. From then on, throughout my life, I won't accept offerings gained through transmitting Dharma. So we must definitely not do this in the future. If you truly have financial difficulties, other means are possible. One shouldn't sell Dharma. Otherwise, as also said in the Sutra of the Great Heap of Jewels, you should regard material gain like excrement. Don't let the filth of material gain pollute your pure mind. That is to say, you must never sustain yourself through wrong livelihood. So-called offerings, respect, and material gain from others are no different from excrement. Never let such filth pollute our pure minds. For a practitioner, it's really not worthwhile, especially if one gains benefits through the means of transmitting Dharma. Actually, for the person receiving the Dharma transmission, it's also a kind of harm. I remember, in the Buddha speaks of upholding the roots of Virtue Sutra, there is also this. If someone teaches Dharma to the masses for material gain because they depend on worldly benefits, they are harmed by the Dharma because they rely on worldly material gain as their means and method. For this reason, such Buddhism not only has no meaning for others, but becomes a cause of harm. We have no need to harm sentient beings or harm ourselves. Buddhism is originally excellent in the beginning, middle, and end. Good from beginning to end throughout, such nectar-like wonderful Dharma. But if Buddhism isn't applied properly, it harms both others and oneself. This is truly unreasonable, so it's also explained here. Therefore, before selfish thoughts are eliminated, don't rush to benefit sentient beings. But when reciting texts, chanting mantras, reading Buddhist sutras and treatises, make aspirations. May the virtuous spirits who hear these have their mind streams liberated. Often make such good aspirations. At the end of reciting water offering, chud and other ritual liturgies, also recite, abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, purify your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Actually, when we normally do life release or recite burnt offering liturgies, or other times, for example, in one's mind stream, if you have nightmares or inauspicious occurrences, when various spirit disturbances appear, at such times often recite some liturgies first. If you really can't recite liturgies, recite this verse. All of Buddha Shakyamuni's essential teachings are included here. This verse was explained before, so I won't explain it here. Actually, this verse is also in the Sutra of Individual Liberation, and it's also taught in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Only this kind of Dharma giving is acceptable. Once one's selfish thoughts are completely eliminated, one shouldn't remain in a state of comfortable solitude even for a moment. When selfish thoughts are truly eliminated, at that time you can't stay in caves, not even for a moment. Day and night, continuously benefiting sentient beings, not distinguishing day from night, regardless of what others say or think. Generally speaking, if the mind to benefit beings is particularly strong, whatever others slander or say about you doesn't matter to you at all. Because in their mind, sentient beings are most important, and what people say about oneself doesn't matter. But we worldly people may not necessarily care what others say about other beings, but what they say about oneself might matter particularly much. So the main difference between bodhisattvas and ordinary beings is whether they have selfish thoughts, whether they have a mind that protects oneself. Everything bodhisattvas do protects sentient beings once encountering their own matters, including the most crucial matter of life and death. They don't care. Why is it that in many bodhisattvas' biographies, when they're breathing their last, about to take their final breath, they don't think of themselves but think of Dharma and sentient beings? Since ancient times, countless biographies of great masters and practitioners all have clear records of this. So we should often think, when selfish mind is eliminated, of course you haven't attained first ground bodhisattva, but basically, for this matter, I've said repeatedly. For example, when you go somewhere today, are you going for yourself, for your own fame, wealth, for your own health? If not, oh, this matter today, indeed with the 3 jewels as witness, there's no benefit for myself, it's completely for others. If it's completely for others' benefit, I shouldn't have any fault, I should have merit. I once had an experience, for the Academy and the Sangha's affairs had some financial relations with other leaders very long ago. At that time I thought, as a monastic, if I offer money to this leader, would there be any fault? Later I thought, if it were for my own promotion, for my own purposes, I would definitely have fault. But for myself, with the 3 jewels as witness, not even the slightest. You could say not even the hope and goal for one meal. I thought there should be no fault whatsoever, so I gave 3,000 yuan. 3,000 yuan at that time, many years ago. Now all those leaders have died. Om Mani Padme Hum is still served a great purpose very, very long ago. This shows the time has arrived for wholeheartedly benefiting others. This covers Dharma giving. Next, we'll discuss fearlessness giving. For beings without protectors, being their protector. For beings without refuge, being their refuge. For beings without friends, being their friend. Especially the Buddha also said that among all conditioned virtuous practices, protecting sentient beings' lives has the greatest merit and benefit. So it's already explained here. In our world, there are still many who deserve help and deserve protection. Of course, fearlessness here may refer to beings experiencing various fears and terrors in this life. We should also try our best to protect and shelter them. This is also fearlessness giving, especially when individual beings' most precious lives are persecuted or threatened. We should make every effort to rescue them. Buddha also taught this in different sutras. Nagarjuna also taught this in the treatise on the great perfection of wisdom. Among all conditioned virtuous practices, protecting life has the greatest merit and benefit. We know that among conditioned virtuous practices, for example, in the 7-branch offering, there's dedication, rejoicing, and many others. Worldly practices like circumambulation, reciting texts, and meditation. Among these many conditioned virtuous practices, protecting beings is most important. So, 20 years ago, I've always placed special emphasis on life release. Indeed, I always feel, even if in one lifetime I can protect just a few individual beings, that's worthwhile. Some Dharma friends here may have harmed many beings before. Let me give everyone a reminder. For example, if you previously harmed frogs, try your best in the future. When you have conditions and circumstances mature, release more frogs. If you previously ate a lot of seafood, lease lives, you should also try your best throughout your lifetime when you have opportunities. Even if you truly lack financial resources or conditions, have others release more seafood. This is a kind of compensation for life. Very few people may not know this, but I believe many people here, due to childhood environment and the influence of surrounding education, many people, some monastics created particularly frightening karma before ordination, some lay people before learning Buddhism. In your own memory, you may have harmed many beings. So for confession, one method is printing some prayer flags with Vajrasattva mantra or Avalokiteshvara mantra. This is one method. Another method is reciting Vajrasattva and 100-syllable mantra for confession. Another method, release as much as possible the beings you harmed, releasing them again. For example, if you previously very likely killed 2 dogs in this lifetime, at least release 2 dogs or more. This is also a kind of life compensation. Can it completely offset? Karma is very profound, I dare not say, but this is also a very good confession method. It's also explained here that among conditioned practices, life release has the greatest merit. Therefore, those with power and influence should order prohibition of fishing and hunting, should prohibit fishing. Now, all oceans and lakes are filled with fishing nets. It's extremely frightening. Others should also rescue according to their ability. Some sheep being taken to slaughterhouses, about to be killed, dying fish, insects and so forth. We often encounter beings about to lose their lives at markets and slaughterhouses. Being able to rescue them is extremely important. If so, perhaps you yourself will experience karmic results in this very lifetime. Previously, it should have been around 1976, before the Tangshan earthquake. There was a person who was saved by a fox. What was the reason? Because he had previously saved a fox. Later, when the Tangshan earthquake was really about to occur, at midnight, that fox suddenly came to scratch at his door. After he came out, it kept biting him, wanting him to go down, using various methods. Later, that person had no choice but to go to the outside courtyard at midnight. At this time, the earthquake suddenly occurred. Later, that person was forever very grateful to this fox. He often said that actually the earth is one family. Whether animals or living beings, they all have conscience, all have a heart. We should care for each other. The relationship between humans and nature is closely interconnected. He often said this. Some animals may repay kindness, but regardless, in the future during our remaining lifetime, at least release some life once a year. Even if you don't have favorable conditions, often rejoice in others' life. Release even when it rains and there are small insects on the road, or when weather is particularly dry and you see individual beings about to die on the road. At that time, place them in particularly quiet places, places where they won't easily be stepped on. This is all life release. In Tibetan areas, indeed, when seeing a life, everyone is particularly, this is a manifestation of compassion. I hope we Buddhists in the future, regardless of any circumstance, whenever we see a life, when it's being harmed, immediately find ways to rescue it. This is the responsibility we Mahayana Buddhist children should have. In summary, we must, in actual practice, by every possible means, spare no effort in benefiting sentient beings. The above-mentioned giving is also a main part of Tantric Samaya vows. The vows of the 5 families also says, the jewel family Samaya is to constantly practice 4 givings. Dharma giving, material giving, fearlessness giving, and with loving kindness. It should be mentioned elsewhere, loving kindness giving based on compassion. These 4 kinds of giving originally, the next parameter of discipline would also be discussed, but time is up. Let's stop here.
Bandara